Please leave. The executive vice president's wife and his son are already upstairs." The cold, clipped voice of the executive assistant echoed across the marble lobby, making me doubt my own ears. Outside the soaring floor-to-ceiling glass atrium of the Park Avenue skyscraper, a relentless autumn rain hammered against the panes with a chilling fury. Beside me, a small warm hand squeezed my fingers tightly. My 6-year-old daughter Lily was looking up at me with wide, anxious eyes. "His wife?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice level. "What on earth are you talking about?" "I'm Mitchell's wife. Chloe Jenkins." My husband's personal secretary let out a dry, mocking snort. Her gaze swept over the off-the-racket coats Lily and I were wearing, evaluating us like charity cases. At that precise moment, an icy shiver ran down my spine. I knew, with sickening certainty, that something had gone horribly, catastrophically wrong. The corporate headquarters where we had come to surprise my husband after work had instantly transformed into a hostile battlefield. But neither my husband nor this arrogant secretary knew the truth yet. They had no idea that standing silently behind me were 3 powerful older brothers who held immense influence over both the highest corridors of American power and the deepest, most dangerous networks of the financial underworld. They had no idea that starting tonight, the comfortable, privileged lives they had built on my back were fated to come crashing down in a catastrophic explosion. It all started on a chilly Saturday evening in late autumn. "Mommy, Daddy said he'd finish early today, right?" Lily asked, swinging her little red umbrella with pure joy. "He sure did, sweetheart," I replied, smiling down at her. "He said he only had to make a quick appearance at the company's foundation gala here, at the main building. And then he'd head right home. That's why we're going to give him the biggest surprise ever." My husband, Mitchell Sterling, was the executive vice president of Vanguard Horizon Construction, a prominent mid-sized development firm in New York. He was a man who had been promoted to the executive suite at an unprecedented pace 3 years ago. All thanks to massive financial investments from my family and the unspoken, invisible backing of my brothers. Mitchell used to hold my hands, look into my eyes, and say, "Jules, thank you so much for always supporting me from behind the scenes." Because of those tender words, I had placed my complete trust in him, dedicating myself entirely to raising our daughter and maintaining our home. Tonight, Lily had insisted on coming out in the pouring rain because she had something special she was desperate to show her father. Clutched tightly in her little hands was a paper necklace she had made in her kindergarten art class, featuring a slightly lopsided hand-drawn portrait of Mitchell's smiling face. As the rain intensified outside, we stepped into the grand lobby of Vanguard Horizon's Midtown Manhattan headquarters. The space was buzzing with men in tailored tuxedos and women in stunning designer evening gowns, all mingling with wealthy corporate executives and city politicians. "Wow, this place is so fancy, Mommy, isn't it?" Lily whispered in awe. "Daddy works so hard in such a big building." We walked toward the reception desk, intending to ask a familiar staff member to let Mitchell know we were waiting, but our path was suddenly blocked by Mitchell's personal secretary, Chloe Jenkins. Chloe knew perfectly well that I was Mitchell's legal wife. I had spoken to her on the phone dozens of times to arrange holiday client gifts, and I had personally visited the office to drop off forgotten legal documents. Yet, her demeanor tonight was completely unrecognizable. Dressed in an expensive designer suit, she looked down her nose at us with undisguised contempt. "My goodness, Julianne, what are you doing here?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Tonight's gala is strictly restricted to invited corporate guests and family." "Good evening, Chloe. You're working late," I said, offering a polite smile. "I brought Lily down to surprise Mitch." Chloe let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "Surprise him? Oh, I'm sure he'd be surprised. All right, but frankly, your presence here is nothing more than a massive embarrassment. The executive vice president's legitimate family is already attending the gala upstairs." His legitimate family? My mind went entirely blank. Yes, his gorgeous fiancée, his adorable young son, and his future wife. Chloe stated coldly. "Having you standing around down here is extremely distasteful." I suggest you turn around and leave immediately before I'm forced to call building security. Her voice wasn't overly loud, but it carried enough icy authority to cut through the ambient chatter of the lobby. I could feel the stinging gaze of dozens of high society guests shifting toward us. "Look over there," a woman whispered audibly. "That woman is actually claiming to be the executive VP's wife. How embarrassing." Another voice chimed in. "Everyone inside knows his real partner is that stunning socialite with the little boy." The venomous murmurs pricked at my ears without mercy. I stood frozen in shock, temporarily robbed of my voice. I couldn't comprehend the nightmare unfolding in front of me. I was Mitchell's lawful wife, and Lily was his only child. How could there be another wife and son waiting for him in the ballroom? "Mommy, where's Daddy?" "That lady is scaring me," Lily whimpered, tugging desperately at the hem of my trench coat. Her trembling voice snapped me back to reality. I instantly dropped to one knee and gently covered both of Lily's ears with my hands. I couldn't allow another word of this toxic filth to poison my daughter's innocent world. Biting my lower lip, I fought down the volcanic eruption of rage and grief that threatened to shake my entire body. I stood back up and locked eyes with Chloe, staring her down with absolute freezing clarity. This woman had made a fatal miscalculation about who I really was. She truly believed I was just a submissive, sheltered housewife who knew nothing about how the real world operated. Without breaking eye contact, I quietly reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I dialed a number and let it flash across the screen. It was the direct private line of the man I relied on most in this world, and the man whose power terrified everyone else. My third older brother. "I don't know who you think you're calling, but it won't do you any good?" Chloe snickered, watching my knuckles turn white around the phone. "What are you calling your poor mother upstate to cry about it?" Her words were loaded with unmistakable scorn and classist mockery. I didn't dignify her taunt with a response. I just stared at the screen as the line connected. Chloe was utterly convinced that I came from a working-class background, struggling to stretch a household budget, and honestly, it made sense why she thought that. When I married Mitchell, I intentionally kept the true details of my lineage a complete secret from him. My maiden name is Vance, Julianne Vance. In the United States, anyone operating within high finance, federal politics, or elite real estate knows the Vance dynasty. My family is an old money empire that has exerted massive quiet influence across the country since the Gilded Age. I was blessed with 3 significantly older brothers who raised me like a princess after our parents passed away. My eldest brother, Arthur Vance, was elected to the United States Senate at a remarkably young age and is widely considered a leading contender for the upcoming presidential race. My second brother, Edward Vance, is the Executive Vice President and Chief Credit Officer of Sovereign Heritage Trust, one of Wall Street's largest and most powerful financial institutions. And my third brother, Victor Vance, operates in the shadows. Publicly, he is the CEO of Vance Capital, a colossal private equity firm, but privately, he is the undisputed master of underground intelligence, private security, and corporate fixers across the continent. As the youngest daughter, I was showered with an almost suffocating amount of adoration by my brothers. "Jules, if any bastard ever dares to make you cry, I'll wipe him off the face of the earth without a trace," Victor used to tell me, his voice carrying a chillingly casual tone that made it impossible to tell if he was joking or deadly serious. But growing up under the crushing weight of such an extraordinary family name felt suffocating to me. As soon as I graduated from university, I concealed my background, dropped my famous last name, and took a job at a modest architectural design studio in Manhattan. That was where I met Mitchell, who was just a struggling, average-looking commercial salesman at the time. "One day, I'm going to build massive skyscrapers with my own 2 hands and make a real difference in this city," he had told me, his eyes shining with passionate ambition. To me, surrounded by people who had everything handed to them, his raw determination seemed refreshing and brilliant. Because Mitchell knew nothing about the Vance empire, I believed he loved me purely for who I was as a woman. At least that was what I had foolishly believed. When he asked me to marry him, promising to make me happy for the rest of my life, I braced myself to cut ties with my family to protect our simple love. We held a tiny private wedding ceremony with only a few witnesses. My brothers were furiously opposed to the marriage, but in the end, they respected my stubborn resolve and walked me down the aisle with tears in their eyes. Yet, almost immediately after we tied the knot, Mitchell's stagnant career experienced a miraculous, meteoric rise. When Vanguard Horizon faced a devastating liquidity crisis, a massive corporate rescue loan was mysteriously approved by a major Wall Street bank overnight. When the firm bid on lucrative municipal infrastructure projects, rival conglomerates inexplicably withdrew their bids one after another, leaving Vanguard Horizon to secure monopoly contracts. Every single one of those miracles was the result of my older brothers pulling strings in the shadows to ensure their baby sister's husband succeeded. Mitchell, however, was entirely convinced that his rapid ascent was solely the result of his own unmatched genius and superior business acumen. "Jules, I just landed another multi-million-dollar development deal," he would boast when he came home. "The market is finally recognizing my extraordinary talent." Watching my husband beam with pride, I chose to keep the truth buried, simply smiling and saying, "That's wonderful, Mitch. I'm so proud of you." I couldn't bear to wound his male ego. As a direct result of my silence, Mitchell skyrocketed to the position of executive vice president by his mid-30s. Once he acquired massive wealth, executive prestige, and a seven-figure compensation package, the man I married began to change. His nights out grew longer, his absences from home stretched into days, and his attitude toward Lily and me turned increasingly frigid and dismissive. "I'm a top-tier corporate executive now," he snapped at me recently. "We live in two completely different worlds. You're just a naive housewife who doesn't understand high business." And tonight, that simmering disdain had finally culminated in this grotesque betrayal. Standing beneath the brilliant crystal chandelier of the lobby, Chloe pointed a manicured finger at my basic trench coat. "Mr. Sterling is completely bored of a plain, unglamorous woman like you," she sneered. "A man of his executive stature needs a sophisticated, high-profile partner who can actually elevate his corporate standing. A real socialite." "A real socialite?" I repeated quietly. Chloe puffed out her chest with pride. "Exactly. The future Mrs. Sterling, currently networking upstairs, is Victoria Kensington, the sole heiress to Kensington Structures. And the 5-year-old boy holding her hand is the true heir who will one day inherit the Vanguard Horizon empire. Mr. Sterling has already instructed our legal team to initiate formal divorce proceedings against you." The moment those words left her mouth, something inside my brain snapped cleanly in two. The crushing grief of a broken marriage evaporated instantly, replaced by a boiling volcanic rage. This pathetic man had my family's quiet benevolence for his own brilliance, and now he had the sheer audacity to discard me and our daughter for a wealthier upgrade. I was thoroughly, bone-deeply disgusted by his staggering arrogance and selfishness. "Mommy, Daddy doesn't want Lily anymore." Despite my hands covering her ears, some of Chloe's venom had slipped through to my daughter. Large, heavy tears spilled over Lily's eyelashes and raced down her pale cheeks. There is no power on earth stronger than a mother's fury when her child is attacked. In that exact second, I made my decision. I was done playing the role of the quiet, supportive wife. I would make Mitchell Sterling, Victoria Kensington, and every single parasite orbiting them pay an absolute devastating price for humiliating my daughter. I pressed the call button on my screen. The line rang only once. "Jules, what's going on?" My third brother, Victor's deep, razor-sharp voice sounded through the earpiece, even across the cellular connection. His razor-sharp intuition picked up on the abnormal tension in my silence. "Why are you calling me at this hour? Did something happen?" I reached down and gently stroked Lily's hair as she tried desperately to stifle her sobs. Keeping my voice steady and distinct, I reported the situation to the underworld kingpin of New York finance. "Victor, I'm standing in the ground floor lobby of Vanguard Horizon's headquarters." Vance Capital holds the primary stake in that firm. Victor murmured, his tone dropping a fraction of an octave. What happened there, Jules? Mitchell betrayed me. He brought another woman to his company, Gala, and is parading her around as his wife. His secretary just threatened to have building security drag us out into the freezing rain. Lily is crying. Victor, her heart is broken. The moment those words left my lips, an absolute terrifying silence radiated from the other end of the line. It felt as though a blast of Arctic frost had physically materialized through the speaker. I knew without seeing him that the protective older brother had just vanished, replaced entirely by the cold-blooded predator who ruled the financial underworld. I see, Victor said, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet register. That arrogant little nobody has forgotten his place. What do you want me to do, Jules? What do you require from your brothers? I looked up at the opulent ceiling of the lobby, my voice ringing with crystal clarity. I want you to obliterate him, his new mistress, and every single executive who enabled this. Rip away every dime, every title, and every piece of status they think they own. Leave them with nothing. Understood. The operation begins right now, Victor said coldly. Take Lily and get out of that building immediately. No, I'm staying right here, I replied firmly. I'm going to watch the end of their world with my own two eyes. Fine. Just keep Lily safe, Victor said. Give me 3 minutes. In 3 minutes the world they know will cease to exist. The line went dead. I slid the phone back into my pocket and straightened my posture, pulling my shoulders back. The sudden, regal shift in my demeanor caused Chloe to flinch involuntarily, but she quickly recovered her haughty smirk and crossed her arms. I don't know what kind of cheap bluff you're trying to run, calling someone to complain. Chloe mocked. Did you call the police? Don't bother. Our corporate defense attorneys are the best on Wall Street. They'll squash an amateur like you like a bug. Just then, the polished brass doors of the private elevator chimed and slid open. Boisterous, arrogant laughter spilled out into the lobby. Haha, an absolutely phenomenal presentation tonight, Mitch. An older executive boomed. Thank you, sir. The future of Vanguard Horizon has never been brighter. Walking out of the elevator was my husband, Mitchell Sterling, looking dapper in a bespoke black tuxedo. Clinging possessively to his arm was a woman in a shimmering gold evening gown with heavy glamorous makeup. Held tightly in her other hand was a smug-looking 5-year-old boy dressed in a miniature designer suit. Daddy, Lily gasped involuntarily, taking a hopeful step forward. At the sound of her voice, Mitchell froze. His head snapped toward us, and for a fraction of a second, raw panic flashed across his face. But that panic instantly twisted into a scowl of intense irritation. He marched straight toward us, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. Julianne, what the hell are you doing here? Mitchell hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing the attention of his networking partners, though his eyes burned with fury. And why did you drag Lily out here looking like a pair of homeless beggars? You know, tonight is a critical networking event with our most valuable corporate partners. Mitch, I said, my voice eerily calm as I stared into his angry eyes. Who is that woman and who is that child? Mitchell looked momentarily caught off guard by my absolute lack of hysteria. He scoffed, adjusting his silk cufflinks with an arrogant smirk. Well, since you're here, there's no point in hiding it anymore. This is Victoria Kensington, daughter of Richard Kensington, chairman of Kensington Structures, and this little guy is my son, Hudson. He wrapped his arm around Victoria's waist with an intimate familiarity. Victoria looked at me as if I were a bag of garbage that had been dropped on the floor. She raised a delicate designer clutch to cover her smirk. Oh, Mitch, is this dreary little creature your ex-wife? Victoria purred, her voice dripping with Southern Belle condescension. My goodness, the rumors were true. She looked so delightfully uneducated. You can smell the discount retail store on her coat from here. Don't waste your breath on her, Tori. Mitchell sneered, giving me a look of pure disgust. My marriage to Julianne was a tedious mistake from day one. She comes from a nobody family of nobodies. A man who reached the executive suite at my age requires a woman of status, wealth, and breeding to match his ambitions. Every syllable he uttered was a deliberate spit on the 6 years we had spent together. But standing there, I didn't feel a drop of sorrow, only a profound glacial contempt. "I've already had my lawyers draft the divorce filing," Mitchell continued arrogantly. "They'll serve you at the house next week. Sign the papers and get out. Don't expect a single cent in alimony or child support. You can keep full custody of Lily. I don't care. I already have a brilliant, genetically superior son to inherit my legacy at Vanguard Horizon." He didn't even glance down at his daughter. He just stood there, inflating his own ego while Lily hid behind my coat, weeping silently into the fabric. I gripped Lily's hand tightly and maintained a steady, piercing gaze on my husband's face. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue," Mitchell taunted, laughing with Victoria. "Reality check too hard for your little brain to process." I said, "Nothing." Like the terrifying calm at the center of a Class 5 hurricane, I simply stood my ground, waiting for the clock to run out. "Why is that grimy little girl staring at us?" Victoria complained, wrinkling her nose in disgust as she pointed her manicured fingernail at Lily. "Having a dirty little urchin loitering in the lobby during a high society gala completely destroys the brand prestige of Vanguard Horizon. Don't you agree, Mitch?" "She certainly does, Miss Kensington." Chloe Jenkins jumped in immediately, eager to flatter her boss's new mistress. "Julianne, do you possess zero basic etiquette? Crashing an elite corporate gala in rags is a pathetic attempt to sabotage the executive VP's career." Mitchell nodded firmly in agreement, his eyes boring into mine with bitter resentment. "That's always been your biggest flaw, Jules. You have no concept of how the upper crust operates. Do you have any idea how hard I've fought to climb the corporate ladder? You belong in the clearance aisle of a suburban strip mall, not in a Park Avenue executive lobby." I absorbed his verbal abuse without blinking. I realized that responding to him would be a tragic waste of breath. Seeing my silence as weakness, Mitchell grew even more emboldened. "Mr. Sterling, look at what the child is holding." Chloe pointed at the paper object Lily had been clutching against her chest all evening. It was the construction paper necklace from art class, adorned with a crude, brightly colored drawing of Mitchell, laughing. "Daddy, I made this for you at school today," Lily said, her little voice shaking with bravery as she stepped out from behind my leg and offered the paper necklace to him. Her tiny hands were trembling violently. Somewhere in her innocent heart, she still desperately believed her father would smile and pick her up. Mitchell glanced down at the necklace and let out a harsh, theatrical laugh. "What is this piece of garbage? Do you have any concept of who I am? I am the executive vice president of this corporation. You expect me to wear a piece of taped-together trash around my neck in front of Manhattan's elite? It's not trash, Daddy. I worked so hard to draw your face." Lily cried out, tears streaming freely down her face. Instead of taking it, Mitchell slapped the paper necklace out of her hands. It hit the marble floor, and before Lily could reach for it, he brought the heel of his Italian leather shoe down on top of it, grinding it into the dirt. The dry, crinkling sound of the paper being crushed echoed sickeningly across the lobby. "A piece of trash like this is an insult to my executive status," Mitchell spat. "My son Hudson is already taking private violin lessons at Juilliard and speaks fluent French. Compared to an elite prodigy like him, what are you? Just a useless, weeping little burden who can't do anything right." "That's right. Daddy loves me way more than you." Hudson chimed in, sticking his tongue out at Lily while Victoria beamed with maternal pride. Around us, several executives and wealthy investors stood watching the spectacle, whispering behind their drinks. Shameful, really, but what can she expect? The class divide is just too vast. When a nobody tries to cling to a high executive, this is what happens. Not a single person stepped forward to intervene. They simply watched us like spectators at a Roman gladiator match. Lily dropped to her knees on the cold marble, staring at the ruined shoe-printed paper necklace. Her little shoulders shook violently as she broke down into inconsolable wails. I immediately knelt down and pulled her fiercely into my chest. "Daddy, Daddy, she sobbed into my collarbone. At that moment, the last remaining shred of my humanity toward Mitchell Sterling evaporated completely. To watch him humiliate our daughter and destroy her innocent love just to score cheap points with a spoiled socialite was an unforgivable crime. I reached out, picked up the torn, dirty paper necklace, and folded it carefully into my coat pocket. Then I stood up slowly. All emotion had drained from my face, leaving behind a mask of absolute chilling ice. "Why are you glaring at me like that, Jules?" Mitchell demanded, crossing his arms with an arrogant sneer. "What do you think you can possibly do to me? Your parents were nobodies who died with a basic life insurance policy. If you try to fight me in court, I'll freeze your bank accounts and leave you starving on the streets by tomorrow morning." Chloe smiled triumphantly. "You heard the executive VP. Stop making a scene and get out of here before we have you thrown into the gutter where you belong." I ignored them completely and lifted my eyes to the digital clock mounted above the security desk. 2 minutes and 50 seconds had passed since I hung up with Victor. Give me 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, the world they know will cease to exist. My brother's promise echoed in my mind like a death nail. I looked Mitchell straight in the eye. "Mitch, do you genuinely believe you climbed to the top of this city entirely on your own merit?" My cold, steady question caused a brief flicker of unease across his face, but he quickly brushed it off with a loud, theatrical scoff. "Ha! Still grasping at straws because you can't admit defeat. My unmatched business genius combined with Kensington structures. Capital is going to make Vanguard Horizon the most powerful developer in New York. You exist in a pathetic, low-level reality you couldn't even begin to comprehend." He had no idea that those arrogant words would go down in history as the single most foolish, humiliating boast of his pathetic existence. "Security, where the hell are the guards?" Chloe Jenkins barked across the lobby. "Remove these trespassers immediately." 2 burly corporate security guards in tactical suits jogged over, their hands hovering near their utility belts as they surrounded Lily and me with intimidating force. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to vacate the premises immediately," one of the guards said curtly, his tone treating us like vagrants who had wandered in from the subway. "You're trespassing in a restricted corporate zone." "Stand back," I said with unwavering authority. "I am Julianne Vance Sterling, the lawful, legally documented wife of your executive vice president, Mitchell Sterling." Mitchell rolled his eyes in exasperation. "Julianne Vance? Oh, please. When we got married, you made such a big deal about your family name, but your relatives were just a bunch of nobodies from some rural town upstate. You're disgracing my executive reputation with every second you stand here. Throw this crazy woman and her brat out into the rain right now." Victoria giggled, leaning her head against Mitchell's shoulder. "Honestly, Mitch, the lack of class is astounding. Let's get back upstairs to the ballroom. My father is eager to discuss our upcoming merger over champagne." "You're right, Tori. I've wasted enough breath on this garbage," Mitchell said, waving his hand dismissively at the security guards. "Grab them by the arms and toss them out the front doors. If the woman resists, call the NYPD and press charges for criminal trespass and harassment." The guards stepped forward, reaching out their large, calloused hands to grab my shoulders. "Don't touch me," I ordered, my voice dropping into a register of sheer commanding power that caused the 2 men to freeze instinctively in their tracks. Chloe instantly stepped up behind them, screaming in fury. "What are you idiots waiting for? Did you not hear Mr. Sterling's direct order? Who do you think signs your paychecks? Drag these 2 street rats out of here right now." As one of the guards lunged forward to grab my coat, my 6-year-old daughter suddenly leaped in front of me. "Don't you dare touch my mommy," Lily screamed, spreading her tiny arms wide to shield my body while trembling from head to toe with terror. Watching my brave little girl risk her safety to protect me shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. I gently pulled her back against my legs, wrapping my arms around her protectively as I locked eyes with Mitchell and his grinning mistress. "Mitch," I said, my voice carrying a strange, haunting calm, I have one final question for you. Do you honestly believe that you can discard us like garbage and simply walk away without facing any consequences? Consequences? From who? You? Mitchell threw his head back and laughed so hard he had to wipe a tear from his eye. You really are completely delusional. I'm marrying a construction ace and taking over one of the largest firms in Manhattan. What could a penniless, uneducated housewife like you possibly do to me? Sue me? Go right ahead. I'll hire the most aggressive litigation team in New York and drag the proceedings out until you're living in a homeless shelter. Victoria smirked, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. Know your place, you sad little woman. Mitch belongs to the elite now. He was always far too superior for a dreary suburban nobody like you. From tonight on, we rule Manhattan real estate. You and your brat can go crawl into a sewer and rot. The surrounding executives chuckled in agreement, casting sneering glances our way. She brought this on herself. When an ordinary woman tries to hold back a rising star, she gets crushed. That's just how Wall Street works. To anyone watching, Lily and I were helpless, isolated victims being crushed beneath the boots of the wealthy and powerful. But I didn't feel an ounce of despair. In fact, I was quietly savoring the absolute peak of their staggering hubris, counting down the final seconds. All right, let's go. Move it out. The security guard grabbed my arm roughly, attempting to shove Lily and me toward the revolving glass doors. The automatic doors slid open, and a brutal blast of freezing autumn wind and horizontal rain swept into the lobby, sending a bitter chill through the warm room. Right at that exact second, a voice like thunder boomed across the atrium. Stop right there. The voice was low, resonant, and carried such an overwhelming, terrifying authority that it instantly drowned out the sound of the storm outside. Everyone in the lobby froze in place. Through the open glass doors, a dozen men dressed in matching black tactical suits and earpieces marched into the building in perfect formation. Their presence instantly dwarfed the two corporate security guards, exuding an aura of lethal professional menace. And walking dead center among that phalanx of security was a young man in an impeccably tailored, razor-sharp charcoal suit. As he stepped into the light of the chandelier, I couldn't help the small, satisfied smile that curved my lips. Right on time, Victor. Oh, Daddy, over here, Victoria gasped, her eyes lighting up as she recognized the man walking beside the sharp-suited stranger. It was her father, Richard Kensington, the billionaire chairman of Kensington Structures and a titan of the New York real estate industry. Victoria immediately released Mitchell's arm and trotted forward proudly to greet her father, eager to show off her new corporate conquest. But something was horribly wrong with Richard Kensington. The billionaire chairman, usually known for his aggressive posture and booming arrogance, looked as if he had just seen a ghost. His face was the color of wet ash, sweat was pouring down his forehead despite the autumn chill, and his breathing was ragged and shallow. His bespoke Italian suit was soaked from the rain, but he didn't seem to notice. Instead, he was practically stumbling forward, bowing his head repeatedly in absolute abject terror toward the young man in the charcoal suit walking beside him. Mr. Harrison, I swear to you on my life. Kensington Structures had zero knowledge of this, Richard Kensington pleaded, his voice cracking with hysteria in the middle of the lobby. This was the unauthorized, idiotic behavior of my foolish daughter. Please, I beg of you, have mercy on my company. The entire lobby went dead silent. The chairman of Kensington Structures was publicly groveling like a condemned prisoner before a man none of the executives recognized. Daddy, what on earth are you doing? Victoria shrieked, stopping in her tracks. Why are you bowing to some random nobody? Get up. Shut your mouth, you idiotic, Richard Kensington roared, turning on his daughter with a volcanic fury that made her jump backward in shock. Do you have the slightest concept of whose presence you are standing in? This is Mr. Harrison. He is the chief of staff and senior executive assistant to the Vance family of Vance Capital. The Vance family. Victoria's jaw dropped, her entire body freezing. In the elite echelons of American finance, politics, and real estate, the name Vance represented an untouchable, absolute sovereign power. multi-billion-dollar conglomerates like Vanguard Horizon, and Kensington structures were mere ants compared to the financial empire controlled by the Vance dynasty. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison. Thank you for coming out in the rain," I said quietly, stepping forward at the sound of my voice. Mr. Harrison instantly dropped his intimidating glare toward Richard Kensington. He turned to me, stopped 3 feet away, and bowed deeply and respectfully at a perfect 90 degrees angle. "Miss Vance, Mr. Harrison said, his voice ringing with absolute reverence. "It has been far too long. Victor has instructed me to escort you and young Miss Lily back to the family estate immediately. I pray that neither of you has suffered any physical harm." "We're fine, Mr. Harrison. Lily is safe," I replied, giving him a warm smile. Mr. Harrison straightened up and offered a gentle, reassuring smile to my daughter hiding behind my leg. "You can relax now, Miss Lily. You are completely safe with us." The atmosphere in the Park Avenue lobby instantly plummeted to absolute zero. The executives, the security guards, and the high society guests stood paralyzed like statues, their brains failing to comprehend the scene playing out before them. Mitchell Sterling's face was a study in pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes bulged out of their sockets as he stared at me, his jaw working silently before he finally managed to croak out a sentence. Miss Vance, what is he talking about, Julianne? Vance is just your family's basic maiden name from upstate. It's just a common everyday name." Mr. Harrison turned his head, his sharp eyes locking onto Mitchell with the warmth of an executioner viewing a condemned man. "A common name. What an extraordinary display of monumental ignorance, Mr. Sterling." Harrison took a slow, deliberate step toward my husband. "Did you genuinely believe that in the entire financial ecosystem of the United States, there was more than one Vance dynasty operating at this level? Have you already forgotten the multi-million-dollar corporate bailouts your firm miraculously secured from Wall Street banks whenever you were on the brink of bankruptcy?" The bank loans," Mitchell stammered, his face draining of blood. "I secured those because the loan officers recognized my superior corporate valuation and business model." "Silence, you arrogant fool," Mr. Harrison snapped, his voice slicing through the room like a razor. "Did you really think a mediocre bottom-tier sales rep like he was promoted to executive vice president by age 35 on merit? Every single promotion, every single monopoly contract, every single financial bailout was orchestrated in the shadows by Miss Vance's family to ensure their sister lived a comfortable life." Harrison gestured toward the glass ceiling of the building. "Vance Capital holds a controlling 40% stake in Vanguard Horizon Construction through a series of shell funds. Did you never once bother to look into who owned the fund that paid your exorbitant 7F figure salary?" Mitchell staggered backward, as if he had been physically struck with a baseball bat. "No, that's impossible. Julianne's family is just. They live in a basic house upstate. Miss Julianne Vance is the cherished youngest sibling of the Vance dynasty," Mr. Harrison proclaimed, his voice echoing off the marble walls for everyone to hear. "She is the beloved sister of Senator Arthur Vance of the United States Senate, Edward Vance, Executive Vice President of Sovereign Heritage Bank on Wall Street, and Victor Vance, CEO of Vance Capital. And you pathetic, insignificant little man, dared to refer to this royal bloodline and her daughter, Miss Lily, as garbage and street rats." The sheer weight of Harrison's words hit the room like a tactical bomb. Richard Kensington's legs gave out completely, and he collapsed onto the marble floor, weeping in terror. Victoria began to shake so violently, her gold designer gown rattled, and Mitchell Sterling stood frozen, his skin turning the translucent, waxy color of a cadaver as he stared at me in horror. I took 2 slow, measured steps toward him. The secret I had guarded for 6 years was finally out in the open. Ring, ring, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the dead silence of the lobby was shattered by a deafening chorus of ringtones and vibration alerts. It wasn't just one phone, it was dozens. Mitchell's iPhone, Victoria's designer clutch, Richard Kensington's pocket, and the phones of every single Vanguard Horizon executive who had come downstairs from the ballroom began ringing simultaneously in a frantic, terrifying cacophony. With trembling, erratic fingers, Mitchell pulled his phone from his tuxedo pocket. The caller ID flashed the name of Vanguard Horizon's CEO and majority founder. "Hello, Chief. What's going on?" Mitchell answered, his voice squeaking. Even from 3 feet away, the CEO's volcanic blood-curdling screams were audible through the earpiece. "Mitchell, you abortion of a human being. What in God's name did you do?" "Sir, please calm down. I just got a call from the chairman of Sovereign Heritage Bank. They are instantly freezing every single credit line we possess and demanding the immediate in-full repayment of our entire $150 million corporate debt load by midnight. Immediate repayment." Mitchell gasped, his knees buckling. "If they do that, the firm will be thrown into Chapter 7 liquidation before the stock market opens." "That's not all, you idiot. Our public stock is being shorted to hell by Vance Capital. We are down 70% in after-hours trading. The company is finished. I was told you personally insulted the Vance family. I'll kill you, Sterling. I'll tear you apart with my bare hands." Mitchell dropped his phone. It cracked against the marble floor, the CEO's hysterical screams still buzzing from the speaker. At the exact same moment, Richard Kensington was holding his own phone to his ear, his face contorting in sheer agony. "What do you mean? The Port Authority just stripped us of the Hudson River waterfront contract. That project is worth $400 million. It's our entire operating pipeline." "What?" The Federal Department of Transportation intervened directly. Senator Arthur Vance's office. Richard dropped his phone and let out a primal howl of despair. Senator Arthur Vance wielded immense unchecked influence across federal and municipal infrastructure committees. Wiping a mid-size contractor like Kensington's structures off the map took him less effort than swatting a fly. "Daddy, what's happening?" Victoria screamed, running over to her father with tears running down her face. "What do you mean we lost the waterfront contract? We're rich. We're Kensington structures. We're ruined." Richard Kensington roared, backhanding his daughter across the face with such force she tumbled onto the floor. "You arrogant, brainless, because you insulted Miss Vance. Kensington Structures is filing for bankruptcy tomorrow morning. You just destroyed 3 generations of family wealth in 5 minutes." No, I didn't know." Victoria sobbed, holding her stinging cheek as she turned her terrified eyes toward Mitchell. "Mitch, you told me she was a suburban nobody. You lied to me. You used me to get my father's capital." "No, Tori, I swear to God I didn't know," Mitchell stammered, waving his hands frantically as he took a stumbling step toward me. Jules, honey, please. You have to believe me. I had no concept that your family was the Vance dynasty. If I had known who your brothers were, I would never ever have treated you like this." Listening to his frantic, pathetic excuses, a wave of profound, icy disgust washed over my soul. When he thought I was weak, he crushed me beneath his boot. The second he realized I held the power, he graveled like a beaten dog. His core character was nothing more than a cowardly, opportunistic parasite. "Julianne Vance, please look at me." Suddenly, Chloe Jenkins threw herself onto the floor, crawling across the marble on her knees until she was practically kissing the hem of my coat. Tears and mascara streamed down her face as she sobbed hysterically. "I was forced to do it, Miss Vance. Mr. Sterling threatened to terminate my employment and ruin my corporate career if I didn't insult you tonight. I've always admired you and Miss Lily. Please, you have to tell Vance Capital to spare my personal bank accounts. I'm just an employee." "You lying," Victoria screamed, lunging forward and grabbing Chloe by the roots of her hair. "You were sleeping with him. You're his side mistress. How dare you try to play the innocent victim when you were helping him hide his money?" "Get off me, you fake socialite," Chloe shrieked, clawing at Victoria's designer face. "You're just a bankrupt nobody now. Mr. Sterling only wanted your father's money to cover up his accounting fraud." Right there in the center of the Grand Park Avenue lobby, the glamorous socialite in her gold evening gown and the executive secretary in her designer suit were rolling on the floor, pulling hair, punching, and tearing at each other's clothes like feral animals in a gutter. Mitchell didn't even attempt to separate them. Instead, he dropped to his knees and began crawling across the floor toward me, his hands shaking violently as he frantically began scooping up the torn, dirty remnants of Lily's paper necklace from the floor. "Look, Jules, look, I'm saving it," Mitchell babbled hysterically, holding up a crushed piece of construction paper with his muddy shoe print across it. "It's a masterpiece. I'm going to take it to a professional framing shop tomorrow morning. I'll hang it in my executive office. I love Lily. I'm a wonderful father. Please, Jules, call your brother Victor, tell him to stop the short sale on Vanguard Horizon." Lily and I stood in silence, watching the grotesque, humiliating spectacle of the man who had once been our entire world. Lily wasn't crying anymore. Her little hand gripped mine tightly, her eyes staring at Mitchell, not as a father, but as a strange, pathetic creature she no longer recognized. The Vance Empire had been unleashed, and the destruction was moving at a speed and scale that defied imagination. This wasn't a domestic squabble. This was an apex predator crushing an insect that had dared to bite it. "How utterly pathetic, Mr. Sterling," Mr. Harrison said, his voice dropping like an anvil as he looked down at Mitchell, attempting to smooth out the ruined paper necklace. "Everything you are doing right now is an absolute waste of energy. The execution order has already been processed." Harrison reached into his tailored jacket and produced a sleek iPad Pro, tapping the screen before holding it directly in front of Mitchell's pale face. 10 minutes ago, Vance Capital exercised its controlling 40% voting rights to convene an emergency executive board meeting via teleconference, Harrison stated coldly. With the unanimous concurrence of the founding CEO and the institutional shareholders, an immediate resolution was passed. A resolution?" Mitchell whispered, his eyes darting across the digital text on the screen. "Yes, effective as of 8:15 p.m. tonight. Mitchell Sterling has been formally stripped of his executive vice president title, his board's seat, and his equity options. You have been terminated for cause without severance, and permanently banned from entering any Vanguard Horizon facility." "What?" Mitchell screamed, leaping to his feet with wild, bloodshot eyes. "You can't fire me. I built this company's commercial division. I generated millions in revenue. I won't accept an illegal termination. I'll sue the board." He lunged toward Harrison, attempting to grab the iPad. Before his fingers could even cross the distance, two of Harrison's tactical security officers stepped in, slamming their forearms into Mitchell's chest and sending him sprawling back onto the marble floor with a heavy thud. "An illegal termination," Mr. Harrison let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "You truly underestimate the intelligence apparatus of Vance Capital. For the past 3 years, you have systematically abused your executive authority to embezzle corporate funds for your personal lifestyle. We have documented every single fraudulent transaction, dummy invoice, and offshore shell account you created." Harrison swiped his finger across the iPad screen. Instantly, detailed spreadsheet ledgers, bank wire transfers, and real estate deeds filled the display. Mitchell's eyes locked onto the numbers, his jaw dropping open in paralyzed terror. "This document details the $3 million in corporate operating funds you illegally diverted to finance your lavish courtship of Victoria Kensington, as well as the luxury condominium in Tribeca you purchased under the name of your secretary, Chloe Jenkins," Harrison read aloud, his voice echoing across the silent lobby. He turned his freezing gaze toward Chloe, who had stopped fighting Victoria and was now staring at the screen in horror. "Miss Jenkins, you received a luxury piece of real estate and substantial cash bribes in exchange for falsifying corporate expense reports and concealing Mr. Sterling's embezzlement from the auditors." "No! Oh God, no!" Chloe whimpered, burying her face in her hands as she realized her entire life was over. The sophisticated, arrogant corporate climber had been reduced to a shivering, trapped criminal. "These actions constitute intentional corporate fraud, grand larceny, and wire fraud under federal and New York state law," Mr. Harrison stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. 5 minutes ago, Vance Capital's legal division transmitted the complete unredacted evidentiary dossier to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI, and the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Federal arrest warrants are currently being expedited. The word FBI struck Mitchell like a physical bullet. He wasn't just losing his job, his wealth, and his social status. He was going to spend the next decade of his life in a federal penitentiary. Jules, please tell him it's a lie," Mitchell screamed, abandoning all remaining dignity as he scrambled across the floor and threw his arms around my ankles, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, I swear to God. I'm sorry. I'll break off the engagement with Tori tonight. I'll fire Chloe. I'll give you everything I have. Just please don't let them send me to federal prison. We're married. I'm Lily's father." I stood motionless, looking down at the weeping, broken man clutching my boots. This was the man I had given up my family for. This was the man I had sworn to love and cherish for the rest of my days. But looking at him now, I felt nothing but a profound, hollow emptiness. He was a moral coward who only cared about saving his own skin. "Mitch," I said, my voice quiet and steady above his hysterical sobs. "If you had simply fallen out of love with me and asked for a divorce, I might have walked away quietly and let you live your life." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the crushed, dirty piece of construction paper, and held it up in front of his face. "But you committed the one unforgivable sin," I continued, my eyes boring into his soul. "Our daughter spent hours making this necklace just to make you smile, and you called it garbage. You threw it on the floor and crushed it with your shoe to impress your mistress. In that exact second, you forfeited the right to call yourself her father, my husband, or even a decent human being." I stepped back, forcing his hands off my boots. The Vance family operates by a very simple creed. We repay kindness 100-fold, but we repay an insult 1,000-fold. My brothers treated me like a treasure my entire life. The moment you chose to humiliate me and shatter Lily's heart, your complete destruction became an absolute unavoidable certainty. I turned my head toward Mr. Harrison and gave a slight nod. "We're done here, Mr. Harrison. Please take Lily and me home." "At once, Miss Vance," Mr. Harrison said, bowing deeply. "The armored limousine is waiting at the curb." "Jules, no, don't leave me." "Jules," Mitchell screamed, his voice cracking in a primal shriek of absolute terror as he tried to crawl after me. But his pathetic screams were completely swallowed by the deafening roar of the storm outside as the automatic doors opened. I picked Lily up in my arms, resting her head on my shoulder, and walked out into the cool night air without glancing back even once. Behind me, the lobby of the Park Avenue skyscraper echoed with the hysterical wailing of Richard Kensington, the bitter screaming of Victoria and Chloe, and the hopeless, anguished sobs of my ruined husband. They had just taken their very first steps into a living hell. And I knew all too well that my brother Victor's vengeance wouldn't stop with a few terminated contracts and police reports. Why isn't anyone answering? Pick up the damn phone. Inside the wreckage of the lobby, Mitchell was frantically jamming his thumb against his cracked iPhone screen, calling every wealthy business associate, country club buddy, and corporate mentor he had ever treated to expensive dinners at Manhattan Steakhouse. Over and over again, the speaker returned nothing but the cold automated drone of voicemail. "The subscriber you are calling is currently unavailable. Dave, Marcus, you bastards drank thousands of dollars of fine scotch on my tab last week. Why are you ignoring my calls?" Mitchell screamed, throwing his phone against the wall in a fit of impotent rage. He didn't realize that within minutes of Vance Capital moving against Vanguard Horizon, the tight-knit grapevine of the New York financial elite had already spread the word. Mitchell Sterling is a dead man walking. He crossed the Vance dynasty. In the ruthless world of Wall Street, nobody was willing to catch fire by standing next to a burning building. Deserting a sinking ship was simply good business. "Daddy, do something. Call the mayor's office. Use Kensington Structures' legal team to block the bank freezes." Victoria screamed, grabbing her silk suit jacket and shaking him violently. "Shut up, you brainless parasite," Richard Kensington wheezed, pushing her away with a look of utter defeat. "We don't have a legal team anymore. Sovereign Heritage Bank just called my CFO. They're freezing our operating accounts pending a federal audit orchestrated by Senator Vance's committee. We can't even make payroll on Monday morning. We're finished. We're going to be liquidated to pay our creditors. No, that can't happen. I'm an AIS, I live on the Upper East Side, Victoria screamed, her voice reaching a fever pitch as she grabbed a priceless porcelain floral vase from a lobby display table and smashed it violently against the marble floor. Crash! The shards flew everywhere, but not a single person turned their head to care about her tantrum. Just then, the heavy mahogany doors to the ballroom burst open, and dozens of wealthy party guests, corporate clients, and Vanguard Horizon vice presidents began pouring out into the lobby in a panicked stampede. The credit lines are gone. The firm is insolvent. Get out of here before the federal auditors seal the building. The crowd scattered toward the exits like cockroaches fleeing a sudden light. As they hurried past Mitchell, men who had been slapping him on the back and toasting his brilliance just 20 minutes ago now cast venomous, disgusted glares in his direction. There's the arrogant bastard, an older executive spat as he hurried past, embezzling company funds and insulting Avance family A's. What a colossal brainless, thank God we hadn't signed that joint venture agreement yet. Wait, please listen to me, Mitchell cried out, reaching out desperately to grab the coat sleeve of a departing real estate developer. Vanguard Horizon can still be saved. I have the architectural designs, I have the commercial pipeline, we can secure alternative bridging finance from private lenders. The developer jerked his arm away, as if Mitchell were infected with the plague. Get away from me, you criminal, he snarled, pushing through the revolving doors and vanishing into the rainy Manhattan night. Mitchell's hands grasped at empty air. Mitch, look at this! Chloe Jenkins whispered, her voice trembling so violently she could barely hold her phone. Her face was chalk white. My Tribeca condo, the deed, the closing documents, and our priv and our private text messages about the offshore, our accounts. Mitchell snatched the phone from her shaking hands, his eyes widened in horror. Victor Vance's underground intelligence network had executed a flawless media assassination. High-resolution photos of Mitchell and Chloe, copies of their fraudulent invoices, and detailed breakdowns of their illegal wire transfers were already being broadcast across financial news blogs and social media platforms under the breaking headline, Vanguard Horizon exec exposed in $3M fraud scandal. It's over. My career is completely over, Chloe whimpered, sinking onto the floor and pulling her knees to her chest. I'm going to federal prison. I can't survive in prison. Mitch! Shut up! Mitchell roared, grabbing his hair with both hands as his reality completely shattered. For the past 6 years, his entire life had been a smooth, effortless ride on a golden carpet, quietly laid down by my family. Now that the carpet had been violently yanked out from under him, exposing his own criminal corruption and sheer incompetence, he possessed neither the intellect nor the emotional spine to face the consequences. Jules! I have to find Jules! If I beg her on my knees, she'll call her brothers off, Mitchell muttered maniacally, turning and sprinting toward the revolving glass doors. Before he could take 5 paces, 2 massive, stone-faced security contractors, Mr. Harrison had stationed at the entrance, stepped smoothly into his path, blocking the exit with their broad shoulders. Get out of my way. I need to see my wife. I have the legal right to apologize to my wife, Mitchell screamed, trying to push past them. One of the contractors placed a massive, immovably heavy hand on Mitchell's chest, shoving him backward with casual force. Mr. Sterling, Miss Vance no longer recognizes you as her spouse. If you attempt to approach her or young Miss Lily again, we have been authorized to utilize lethal physical force to neutralize the threat. Do you understand? The absolute chilling professionalism in the contractor's voice caused Mitchell's legs to buckle completely. He collapsed onto the cold marble floor, weeping hysterically into his hands. Outside, the freezing Manhattan storm raged on, hammering the glass atrium as if mocking the absolute destruction of his pathetic, arrogant life. The countdown to his final judgment had already begun, and there was no power on earth that could stop it. Outside the building, The brutal storm and city noise were instantly obliterated the second the heavy bulletproof door of the Maybach limousine sealed shut. Inside, the atmosphere was a sanctuary of absolute tranquility, filled with the soft, warm illumination of ambient lighting and the gentle strains of classical cello music playing over the surround sound system. "Mommy, that lady was so mean." Lily was sitting on my lap, her little eyelids growing heavy as the warmth of the car washed over her. I gently smoothed back her damp bangs and kissed her forehead. "Everything is okay now, my brave little girl," I whispered softly, wrapping a heated cashmere blanket around her shoulders. "Nobody is ever going to hurt you or scream at you ever again. Mommy promises." Within seconds, the rhythmic humming of the limousine's engine lulled Lily into a deep, peaceful sleep. Listening to her steady, quiet breathing, I let out a long, shuddering sigh, feeling the immense tension of the past hour finally begin to drain from my muscles. "We are currently en route to the Bedford estate. Miss Vance," Mr. Harrison said gently from the front passenger seat, looking back at me through the rearview mirror. "Mr. Victor is waiting by the fire for your arrival." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," I said, offering him a weary smile. "Are my brothers terribly angry?" Mr. Harrison let out a soft, knowing chuckle and shook his head. "To state that they are angry would be a historic understatement, Miss Vance. The moment Mr. Victor received your call and realized that man had brought tears to your eyes and crushed young Miss Lily's creation, he snapped a solid titanium fountain pen in half between his fingers. All three of your brothers have sworn an oath to ensure Mr. Sterling experiences the absolute maximum extent of financial and legal destruction." 40 minutes later, the Maybach turned off a quiet tree-lined road in Westchester County and approached the imposing row-iron security gates of the Vance family's ancestral estate in Bedford, New York. The gate swung open instantly and the vehicle glided up the long, winding asphalt driveway, coming to a smooth stop in front of a sprawling, magnificent Georgian brick mansion surrounded by manicured grounds. As the chauffeur opened the door, a team of household staff holding large, heavy umbrellas stepped forward instantly to shield us from the rain. "Welcome home, Miss Julianne." "Welcome home, Miss Lily," the head butler said, bowing deeply as I stepped out of the vehicle, cradling my sleeping daughter in my arms. I walked through the towering mahogany front doors and stepped into the familiar, magnificent grand foyer of my childhood home. Moving quietly through the corridors, I carried Lily upstairs to my old bedroom, a beautifully preserved suite decorated in warm, comforting tones, and laid her down gently on the king-sized feather mattress. I pulled the down duvet over her shoulders, kissed her cheek one last time, and quietly closed the door behind me. When I went downstairs to the formal library, a warm, roaring fire was crackling in the massive marble fireplace. Standing by the hearth, swirling a crystal glass of 18-year-old single malt scotch in his hand, was the silhouette of a tall, impeccably dressed man. "You're home, Jules," the man said, turning around. It was my third older brother, Victor Vance. In the ruthless corporate boardrooms of New York, he was feared as the ice sovereign, a cold-blooded financial executioner who could dismantle a billion-dollar conglomerate without blinking. But as he looked across the library at me, his dark eyes softened completely, filled with the endless protective warmth of the brother who had raised me. "I'm home, Victor," I said, feeling a sudden lump form in my throat. "Is Lily asleep?" he asked softly, setting his scotch glass down onto the silver tray. "She must be exhausted after such a traumatic evening. I had the kitchen prepare some hot chamomile tea and light sandwiches for you. Come sit down by the fire." I sank into a plush leather armchair opposite him, accepting the steaming teacup from a quiet maid. The soothing aroma of chamomile and honey washed over me, melting away the lingering chill of the Park Avenue lobby. "Thank you, Victor," I said, looking over at him. "But how did you manage to mobilize your forces and execute those board resolutions so impossibly fast? It was almost as if you knew exactly what was going to happen tonight before I even called you." Victor looked into the roaring flames of the fireplace, his jaw tightening slightly. He reached over to the mahogany coffee table, picked up a thick leather-bound dossier, and placed it gently in my lap. "It wasn't a matter of predicting tonight, Jules," Victor said, his voice dropping into a somber register. "It was a matter of continuous surveillance. I didn't want to shatter your happiness, so I kept my silence for years. But that pathetic bastard Mitchell began betraying your marriage during your second year together." "Our second year," I whispered, my hand trembling slightly as I flipped open the cover of the dossier. Inside was a mountain of meticulously catalogued evidence. There were dozens of high-resolution surveillance photographs showing Mitchell entering boutique hotels and luxury resorts with various women over the past 4 years, accompanied by copies of corporate American Express receipts for diamond jewelry, designer handbags, and 5-star dinners, all organized chronologically. "Mitchell genuinely believed his own arrogant delusions," Victor said coldly. "He actually convinced himself that his commercial brilliance was driving Vanguard Horizon's growth. The reality was the exact opposite. From the moment he was promoted to executive vice president, his reckless expansion projects and incompetent management began hemorrhaging millions of dollars in corporate losses. But Mitch always came home celebrating how profitable the firm was," I said, staring at the financial spreadsheets in the folder. "Because the Vance empire was quietly subsidizing his failures from the shadows," Victor replied, a bitter smile touching his lips. "Edward utilized his credit authority at Sovereign Heritage Bank to artificially extend Vanguard Horizon's borrowing limits, ignoring their toxic debt ratios. And Arthur instructed his congressional infrastructure liaison to direct lucrative federal infrastructure grants toward Vanguard's municipal bids. We did all of it for one simple reason: to ensure that our baby sister remained secure, comfortable, and happily married to the man she chose." Victor pointed a finger at the dossier. "But while we were secretly dumping millions of dollars into his firm to protect your lifestyle, that parasite was funneling the corporate profits into secret offshore accounts to finance his mistresses and his lavish personal spending." As I turned the page, an even more sickening revelation stared back at me. Mitchell's much-boasted engagement to Victoria Kensington wasn't just an arrogant social climb, it was a desperate, calculated criminal conspiracy. Mitchell had realized that corporate auditors were finally closing in on his $3 million embezzlement scheme. In a desperate bid to cover his tracks, he seduced Victoria, intending to use Kensington Structures' clean corporate capital to plug the massive accounting holes in Vanguard Horizon's books before the annual audit. Meanwhile, Richard Kensington had foolishly believed that Vanguard Horizon was a rising superstar backed by mysterious Wall Street money, and had eagerly pushed his daughter into Mitchell's bed to secure a corporate merger. Both men were swimming in a cesspool of mutual greed, actively plotting to discard Lily and me to save their own financial skins. We sat in the shadows, quietly waiting for the day you finally saw through his illusion and decided to walk away," Victor said, his eyes flashing with the cold, lethal glint of a hunting apex predator. "As long as you still loved him, we held our fire to prevent breaking your heart. But tonight, that piece of garbage dared to humiliate you in public and trample on Lily's innocent devotion." In that exact fraction of a second, his protective grace period expired permanently. Victor picked up his glass of scotch and took a slow sip. Everything Mitchell Sterling believes he achieved: his executive title, his bank accounts, his societal standing, was nothing more than an artificial illusion constructed by the Vance family. And starting tonight, I am reclaiming every single shred of it. Listening to my brother lay bare the absolute depth of Mitchell's depravity, contrasted against the limitless, unconditional love my family had extended to protect me, overwhelmed my heart. I felt a profound sense of gratitude toward my brothers, coupled with an ironclad, unshakable resolve to face the future without a single backward glance. Mitchell Sterling and Chloe Jenkins, by order of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bank fraud, and corporate embezzlement. Keep your hands where I can see them. Back in the ground floor lobby of the Park Avenue skyscraper, the heavy glass doors burst open once again. More than a dozen federal agents from the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, accompanied by uniformed NYPD officers, flooded the atrium. At the head of the tactical team was a veteran federal agent holding a stack of freshly stamped federally authorized arrest warrants. "The FBI? Why are you here so fast?" Mitchell screamed, his legs giving out completely as he collapsed onto the wet marble floor, scrambling backward like a crab. In the corporate world, complex financial embezzlement investigations typically take months, if not years, of forensic accounting and subpoena battles before an arrest warrant is ever issued. Yet, here, less than 2 hours after his crimes were exposed, a full-scale federal tactical raid was underway. It was an absolute demonstration of the terrifying, unmatched efficiency of Senator Arthur Vance's federal reach and Victor Vance's perfectly prepared evidentiary dossier. "It wasn't me. I swear to God it wasn't me. It was her," Mitchell shrieked, pointing a trembling accusatory finger at Chloe Jenkins as two federal agents hauled him roughly to his feet. "I am an executive vice president. I delegated all financial ledger management to my secretary. She's the one who created the dummy accounts and stole the money. I am an innocent corporate victim." "What are you talking about, you cowardly bastard?" Chloe screamed like a banshee, struggling violently against the handcuffs, and Agent was clamping around her wrists. "You explicitly commanded me to alter the quarterly balance sheets. You personally signed the wire transfers to buy my Tribeca condo as hush money so I wouldn't report your affairs to the board." "Agent, I have copies of every single incriminating email, voice memo, and offshore bank receipt on my personal cloud drive. I'll turn state's evidence. I'll testify against him in court. Just give me a plea deal." "Shut your mouth, you traitorous whore." Mitchell lunged forward, attempting to headbutt his former secretary in the face, but the two massive FBI agents easily restrained him, slamming him face first against the marble wall. "That's enough. Save your pathetic finger-pointing for the federal prosecutor." The lead agent barked coldly. "We've already executed search warrants on your executive suite and your primary residence, Mr. Sterling. We have the offshore routing numbers and the forged board authorizations. You're looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Take them out to the transport vans." "No, please. Not the handcuffs. I'm a respected Manhattan executive. You can't parade me out in front of the media like this." The cold, heavy steel of the federal handcuffs clicked shut around Mitchell's wrists with a final metallic echo. In that decisive instant, the glamorous, high-flying executive life he had boasted about for years was permanently terminated. Victoria Kensington stood shivering against the reception desk, watching the man she had planned to marry being dragged toward the revolving doors like a common street thug. Her face was pale with horror. "It's a lie. This has to be a nightmare," Victoria babbled hysterically. "He was supposed to be my husband. He was going to take over Vanguard Horizon. How could he be a common criminal? He's nothing. He's a dead, bankrupt criminal." Richard Kensington roared, grabbing his daughter by the arm and shaking her violently. "And because of your staggering arrogance, we're going down with him. Sovereign Heritage Bank just issued a formal notice of default. They're initiating immediate foreclosure on our corporate headquarters, our equipment yards, and our residential properties." "Foreclosure? But Daddy, what about our money?" Victoria screamed. "We don't have any money left. You idiotic child," Richard yelled, his voice cracking with despair. "The Vance family just wiped out our operating credit. By tomorrow afternoon, our Upper East Side penthouse, our Hamptons estate, our luxury SUVs, and every single designer gown in your closet will be seized by federal bankruptcy trustees. You just threw us into the gutter because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." No, I can't live in the gutter. I'm a VIP. I need my designer clothes." Victoria threw herself onto the marble floor, kicking her feet and screaming in a full-blown hysterical tantrum like a spoiled toddler. But not a single departing executive or lobby guard spared her a second glance. In the cold, objective math of New York society, the Kensington name was already a worthless liability. Jules, please save me. I'm sorry. I'll do anything you want." As the federal agents shoved Mitchell's head down to maneuver him into the back of the armored FBI transport van, he turned his face toward the rainy sky and screamed my name with all the desperate lung capacity he possessed. "Let me see Lily. Just let me hear Lily call me Daddy one more time, please." The heavy iron doors of the transport van slammed shut, cutting off his pathetic screams forever. The siren wailed as the federal convoy pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the dark, rain-drenched Manhattan traffic. The Golden Palace Mitchell and Victoria had built on a foundation of arrogance and betrayal had been completely pulverized by the sovereign power of the Vance dynasty, leaving them trapped in a prison of their own making. The following morning, the skies over New York City were a brilliant cloudless sapphire blue, washing away the bitter storm of the previous night. Sitting in the glass-enclosed sunroom of the Bedford mansion, enjoying the gentle autumn sunlight warming the terracotta tiles, I calmly sipped a cup of Earl Grey tea while scanning the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Vanguard Horizon exec arrested in $3M federal embezzlement scandal. Firm collapses into Chapter 7 liquidation. Mid-sized Titan Kensington structures files for emergency bankruptcy following sudden credit freeze. The financial press was abuzz with sensational articles analyzing the miraculous overnight implosion of two prominent New York real estate firms, while corporate analysts on cable news speculated about market volatility and liquidity crunches. Only a tiny elite handful of power brokers in Washington and Wall Street knew the unspoken truth. A fool had touched the third rail of American power by insulting the Vance family.
Did you sleep well, Jules?
I looked up as my second older brother, Edward Vance, strolled into the sunroom. As the executive vice president of Sovereign Heritage Bank, Edward looked impeccably sharp in his navy pinstriped suit, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the morning light as he offered me a warm, affectionate smile. "Good morning, Edward," I said, smiling back. "Thank you for everything last night. Was it difficult to pull Vanguard Horizon's credit lines so abruptly? I don't want you facing any regulatory scrutiny from the Federal Reserve on my account." Edward let out a sophisticated, dismissive laugh and sat down in the wicker armchair opposite me. "Scrutiny, my dear sister. Every single financial action executed last night was conducted in strict, unassailable adherence to federal banking law. The moment Mitchell established unauthorized offshore shell accounts, he triggered the mandatory default and anti-fraud covenants embedded in our master lending agreements. We simply stopped extending him artificial clemency." Edward reached into his leather attaches case and withdrew a sleek embossed corporate folder bearing the Vance Empire emblem, placing it gently on the glass coffee table. "However, Jules, the financial destruction was merely the preliminary phase of the operation," Edward said, his eyes twinkling with brotherly pride. "The most exciting development is what transpired simultaneously in the legal background." "What do you mean?" I asked, tilting my head in curiosity as I opened the folder. Inside was a pristine set of corporate incorporation documents, state registry filings, and real estate deeds. My eyes widened as I read the name printed in bold gold leaf across the top of the master charter. "Studio Vance Design, LLC. Studio Vance Design," I whispered, my heart skipping a beat. "Edward, this is the exact name of the architectural design firm I founded right out of college before I married Mitchell." "Precisely," Edward smiled. "Last night, exactly 1 hour before Vance Capital forced Vanguard Horizon into Chapter 7 liquidation, our private equity division executed a legal buyout of Vanguard's most valuable corporate assets. We acquired their cutting-edge seismic architectural patents, their proprietary design software, and the exclusive employment contracts of their top 30 master architects and structural engineers." I stared at him in utter astonishment. "You bought their entire technical infrastructure. But what about Vanguard Horizon?" "We left Vanguard Horizon as an empty, worthless shell, holding nothing but toxic debt and federal embezzlement liabilities," Edward said with a wolfish grin when Victoria Kensington and her father were bragging about taking over Vanguard Horizon last night. "They were fighting over a sinking, gutted carcass. All of the human talent and proprietary intellectual property that actually gave the firm value was legally transferred into Studio Vance Design before midnight. A wave of profound, thrilling realization washed over me. My brothers hadn't just destroyed my enemies to exact revenge. They had meticulously salvaged the true, clean value of the corporate enterprise and handed it to me on a silver platter, giving me the tools to rebuild my professional dreams. "That's not all, Jules," Edward said, pointing to a second document tucked inside the folder. "Take a look at the contract beneath the charter." I pulled out the document. It was a formal federally authorized master consulting contract issued by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and the Federal Department of Transportation. The Master Architectural and Design Consulting Contract for the Hudson River Waterfront Redevelopment Project. I gasped, my hands shaking as I read the terms. When Kensington Structures collapsed into bankruptcy last night, the city and federal infrastructure committees were left desperately searching for a replacement master designer to lead the $400 million waterfront initiative. Edward explained. Our eldest brother, Senator Arthur Vance, submitted a formal congressional recommendation to the selection committee this morning. He recommended an extraordinarily talented, award-winning young architect who had spent the last 6 years hidden in the shadows. Julianne Vance Arthur recommended me. Tears of overwhelming gratitude began to well up in my eyes. "Jules, let's be entirely honest with each other," Edward said, leaning forward and placing his hand gently over mine. "For the past 6 years, you sacrificed your own brilliant career to play the silent, supportive housewife, pouring your genius into Mitchell's firm. Every single award-winning commercial, skyscraper, and municipal blueprint Mitchell took credit for, over the last 3 years was actually drawn by you late at night at your dining room table while he was out partying." I bit my lower lip, unable to deny his words. Whenever Mitchell had faced a critical design deadline or a complex structural challenge he wasn't smart enough to solve, I had stayed up until dawn, drafting the architectural blueprints for him, asking for nothing in return except his success. He had stolen my intellectual labor, presented it to the Manhattan market as his own genius, and then used that very same success to brand me a useless, uneducated burden. "You don't ever have to hide in the shadows again, my dear sister," Edward said softly, his voice filled with unwavering belief. "It is time for the world to see who the real genius behind Vanguard Horizon always was. It's time for you to build your own skyline under your own name. I know for a fact that Lily will be infinitely prouder of a mother who leads Manhattan's grandest urban development project than one who suffers in silence." The warm morning sunlight streamed through the sunroom glass, illuminating the bold, clear signature line on the federal contract waiting for my name, Julianne Vance, Chief Executive Officer. I closed my eyes, took a deep centering breath, and felt the last remaining chains of my 6-year mistake fall away completely. The years I had sacrificed were gone, but standing here in the warmth of my family's love, I knew that Lily's and my true glorious future was just beginning. 1 month later, on the 68th floor of a gleaming state-of-the-art glass skyscraper in Hudson Yards, overlooking the sweeping panoramic expanse of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline, sat the newly established corporate headquarters of Studio Vance Design. "Miss Vance, the structural engineering team just submitted the revised load-bearing blueprints for the Waterfront Oasis Recreational Pavilion," a senior project manager said, handing me a digital tablet across the sleek conference table. "The federal commissioners reviewed your exterior facade renders this morning, and they are absolutely ecstatic with the design." "Excellent work, David," I said, reviewing the schematics with a practiced professional eye. "Please instruct the technical drafting team to finalize the CAD models by Thursday afternoon so we can initiate site excavation on schedule." Dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored navy blue designer pantsuit, with my hair styled in a clean, elegant blowout, I projected the unmistakable authority of a top-tier corporate CEO. Every trace of the timid, self-acing housewife who had stood in the rain a month ago had vanished completely, replaced by a confident, powerful woman leading a multi-million-dollar urban renaissance. Look, Mommy, look at my drawing. From the corner of my spacious executive suite, where I had installed a dedicated, brightly colored children's play area and art studio, my 6-year-old daughter came running toward my desk. Lily was wearing a pretty yellow dress, her cheeks rosy and smiling as she held up a large piece of drawing paper. On it was a vibrant crayon drawing of a towering rainbow-colored skyscraper with 2 stick figures standing at the very top holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I beamed, picking her up and spinning her around, listening to her bright, unclouded laughter ring across the executive office. All the trauma and terror of that dark November night had completely faded from her innocent heart. Surrounded by the fierce protection of her uncles and the security of our new life, she was thriving at her new private school in Manhattan. Just as I set Lily back down to color, the heavy glass door of my office opened and my executive receptionist stepped inside, her face twisted in an expression of deep discomfort. "Excuse me, Miss Vance," the receptionist said hesitantly. "There is an individual at the ground floor security desk requesting an immediate urgent audience with you. He has no appointment, but he claims his name is Mitchell Sterling." The instant that name entered the room, the relaxed atmosphere in my suite evaporated. Mr. Harrison, who was standing by the window reviewing security protocols, instantly stepped toward my desk, his eyes hardening into steel. "Shall I instruct building security to physically eject him from the premises, Miss Vance?" Mr. Harrison asked coldly. "Or would you prefer I have the NYPD dispatch a tactical unit to arrest him for violating his bail conditions?" I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering Hudson River, feeling a profound, absolute calm settle over my mind. "No, Mr. Harrison," I replied quietly. "Let him come up to the office. It's time to close this chapter of my life once and for all." 5 minutes later, the heavy oak doors of my executive suite slid open. The moment the man stepped across the threshold, my project managers and staff gasped in collective shock. The man standing before us was an absolute unrecognizable shell of the dapper executive who had paraded around Park Avenue in a bespoke tuxedo a month ago. Mitchell Sterling looked like a street vagrant who had just crawled out of an alleyway. He was wearing a filthy, wrinkled, off-the-rack suit that was stained with sweat and city grime. His hair was matted and greasy, his face was covered in a patchy, unkempt beard, and his cheeks were hollow and gaunt from starvation. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the magnificent executive suite with manic, feverish desperation. Following his federal indictment, Mitchell had been forced to liquidate his few remaining hidden savings accounts, just to post his temporary bail bond. But with Vance Capital pursuing civil asset forfeit and federal prosecutors freezing his accounts, he was entirely destitute, evicted from his apartment, and sleeping on a friend's couch while awaiting his criminal trial. Jules Mitchell gasped, his eyes locking onto me, sitting behind the massive mahogany executive desk. He took 2 stumbling steps forward and collapsed to his knees on the plush carpet, tears welling up in his sunken eyes. "Jules, my God, look at you! You look absolutely stunning. You look like a queen." He reached his trembling, filthy hands out toward my desk, attempting to crawl forward, but Mr. Harrison instantly stepped into his path, placing a polished leather shoe firmly against Mitchell's shoulder to halt his advance. "Maintain your distance from the chief executive officer," Mr. Sterling Harrison barked, his voice dripping with menace. "One more step and I will physically incapacitate you." "Jules, please, you have to listen to me." Mitchell sobbed, bowing his forehead against the carpet in abject humiliation. "I was an absolute blind, arrogant idiot. During the criminal discovery phase, my lawyers showed me the corporate design logs from Vanguard Horizon. The federal prosecutors proved that every single award-winning architectural blueprint I submitted over the last 3 years was drafted from your personal IP address. You were the real genius. You were the one generating all the revenue. He lifted his tear-stained face, looking at me with frantic, obsessive desperation. From the moment you left me, I haven't been able to draft a single viable commercial concept. I'm nothing without your brain, Jules. I need you. My life, my career, my sanity. I can't survive without your love and your talent. I rested my elbows on the polished mahogany desktop, resting my chin on my folded hands as I stared down at him with eyes as cold as liquid nitrogen. Even now, facing federal prison and absolute ruin, his entire apology was centered entirely on his own pathetic needs, his own career, and his own survival. "Jules, let's start over," Mitchell begged, wiping snot and tears from his beard with his dirty sleeve. "We're husband and wife. We have Lily. A little girl needs her father growing up. I swear on my life I've reformed. I'll be the most devoted, humble husband in the world. Just please appoint me as the executive vice president of Studio Vance Design. With your architectural genius and my commercial sales experience, we can dominate the Manhattan real estate market together." Listening to his delusional self-serving fantasy, I couldn't even summon the energy to be angry. He was truly irredeemably pathetic. I stood up slowly from my desk, walked around the mahogany table, and stopped 5 feet away from where he was kneeling on the floor. I looked down at him and delivered the exact precise words he had spat at me in the Park Avenue lobby 1 month ago. "Mitch, you really are completely delusional," I said, my voice ringing with crystal clear, icy precision across the silent office. "Do you honestly believe that an uneducated, destitute criminal facing federal prison like you belongs in an elite corporate suite? A woman of my executive stature requires a partner of ethics, strength, and standing, not a pathetic parasite." Mitchell's jaw dropped open, his eyes widening in absolute paralyzed horror as his own cruel words were fed back to him. "Jules, no, please don't say that. Our divorce proceedings were officially finalized by a New York Supreme Court judge yesterday morning." I continued coldly. "I have been awarded sole legal and physical custody of Lily. You have been stripped of all parental rights. Furthermore, in addition to your impending 20-year federal prison sentence for wire fraud, Vance Capital's civil litigation team has secured a formal court judgment against you for $3 million in corporate restitution, plus $5 million in damages for intellectual property theft." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes boring into his soul. "Even if you file for personal bankruptcy, federal restitution orders and fraud judgments are legally non-dischargeable. When you eventually crawl out of federal prison as an old man, you will spend the rest of your miserable existence working minimum-wage manual labor jobs just to pay off the interest on your debt to my family. You will live and die at the absolute bottom of the gutter." My glacial sentence struck him like a physical execution order. Mitchell's entire body began to shake violently. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, except a ragged, wheezing gasp as tears of absolute, hopeless despair poured down his cheeks. The man who had once boasted about his executive superiority was finally trapped in the very same inescapable hell he had condemned my daughter and me to experience. "No, no, Jules. Don't abandon me. I'll die in prison," Mitchell screamed, lunging forward like a madman to grab my designer heels. Before his dirty fingers could even brush my shoes, Mr. Harrison's heavy tactical boot came down with crushing force across Mitchell's wrist, pinning his arm to the carpet. Crack! "Ah!" Mitchell shrieked in agony. "You were explicitly warned, Mr. Sterling," Mr. Harrison said coldly. He signaled to 2 burly building security contractors, waiting by the door. "Remove this criminal trespasser from the building immediately. If he attempts to resist or returns within 100 yards of this skyscraper, execute a citizen's arrest and transfer him to the NYPD custody lockup." The 2 security contractors grabbed Mitchell by his armpits, hauling his limp, sobbing body off the floor and dragging him backward toward the elevators. "Jules, save me. Lily, tell your mommy to save Daddy." "Lily!" Mitchell screamed, thrashing his legs wildly as he was dragged across the polished floor. Lily didn't even look up from her coloring book. She simply hummed a happy little tune, completely ignoring the pathetic wails of the stranger being ejected from our lives. The oak doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams for the final time. Minutes later, down on the bustling ground floor plaza of Hudson Yards, pedestrians and financial office workers stopped to stare as building security tossed the filthy, weeping former executive out onto the cold concrete sidewalk. "Hey, isn't that Mitchell Sterling? The guy who embezzled $3 million from Vanguard Horizon?" A young Wall Street analyst asked, pulling out his iPhone to record the scene. "Holy crap, it is. Look at him. He looks like a homeless junkie." Another passerby laughed, snapping high-resolution photos that would immediately go viral across Manhattan social media. The man who had once obsessed over his elite social prestige was now a public spectacle of absolute permanent humiliation. Back in the tranquility of my 68th floor executive suite, Mr. Harrison stepped up to my desk, holding a printed intelligence report. "Miss Vance, if you are interested, I have the final status updates regarding the other individuals involved in last month's incident," Harrison said respectfully. "Go ahead, Mr. Harrison," I said, looking out at the river. Following the emergency bankruptcy liquidation of Kensington's structures, Victoria Kensington and her father were stripped of all personal assets, bank accounts, and residential properties by federal creditors, Harrison read from the report. "Miss Kensington is currently residing in a run-down $300 a month basement apartment in Queens. To survive, the former heiress is currently working 12-hour shifts as a minimum-wage dishwasher and busgirl at a greasy diner in the Bronx. According to our field surveillance, she breaks down crying in the restaurant kitchen every single day, complaining about her ruined hands." "And what about Chloe Jenkins?" I asked coldly. "Miss Jenkins pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy and wire fraud charges last week in an unsuccessful attempt to secure a reduced sentence," Harrison replied with a dry smile. "The federal judge rejected her plea for clemency and sentenced her to 8 years in a federal correctional facility without the possibility of early parole. Her professional corporate career is permanently over." I nodded slowly, feeling a profound, clean sense of closure wash over my soul. They had intoxicated themselves with the illusion of power, crushing those they believed were beneath them for cheap, arrogant thrills. But the moment they collided with the true, unshakable strength of the Vance Empire, their artificial sand castles had been swept away without leaving a single trace behind. "The garbage has been entirely removed from your life, Miss Vance," Mr. Harrison said, bowing his head. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. And please express my deepest love and gratitude to my brothers," I said softly. "But from this moment forward, I am going to walk my own path, not just as a Vance heiress, but as Julianne Vance, architect and mother." I turned away from the window and walked over to the sunny corner of the suite, where Lily was finishing her artwork. I knelt down beside her table, looking at the vibrant crayon drawing of our future skyscraper. "Is this the new building Mommy is designing on the river, sweetheart?" I asked, stroking her soft hair. "Uh-huh," Lily beamed, pointing her crayon at the 2 smiling stick figures at the top of the tower. "This is you and me, Mommy, standing on top of the whole world where nobody can ever be mean to us again." "You're absolutely right, my darling," I whispered, wrapping my arms around her and pulling her tight against my heart. "Mommy is going to build the strongest, most beautiful buildings in the entire world for you. We are never going to let anyone look down on us ever again." Holding my daughter in my arms, looking out over the limitless horizon of New York City, I felt an overwhelming wave of pure, unshakable triumph. The parasites who had fed on my kindness had been cast down into the darkness they deserved, while Lily and I stood secure in the light, ready to build a magnificent future with our own 2 hands. 3 years later, on a brilliant sun-drenched afternoon in late spring, a gentle, refreshing breeze rolled off the Hudson River, carrying the clean scent of water and blooming cherry blossoms across the Manhattan waterfront. Rising majestically along the riverbank was a breathtaking architectural masterpiece, composed of sweeping organic glass curves and warm sustainable timber, the newly completed Hudson River waterfront oasis. This wasn't just another sterile commercial office tower built for Wall Street billionaires. It was a groundbreaking $400 million civic sanctuary designed from the ground up to serve the people of New York. The sprawling complex featured an immersive, multi-story educational children's pavilion, a state-of-the-art subsidized childcare center for working parents, and serene public botanical gardens where elderly citizens and young families could sit together and watch the sailboats glide across the river. Today was the grand ribbon-cutting ceremony, and the main plaza was overflowing with hundreds of cheering citizens, municipal leaders, federal officials, and international architectural journalists. Miss Vance, Julianne, over here. Miss Vance. The international architectural press is calling the waterfront oasis the most significant civic design achievement in New York in a century. How does it feel to see your vision completed? Dozens of microphones and camera lenses were thrust in my direction as I stood on the presentation stage, dressed in a stunning bespoke white silk designer suit. Looking out at the cheering crowd and the happy children already playing in the plaza gardens, I felt a profound, humbling warmth fill my chest. I smiled warmly at the reporters, answering their questions with the grace and steady confidence of a woman who had thoroughly conquered her world. Jules, you did it. We are so incredibly proud of you. Parting through the sea of high society guests and municipal leaders, 3 tall, imposing men walked onto the stage and wrapped me in a collective crushing group hug. It was my brothers, Senator Arthur Vance, Wall Street Executive Vice President Edward Vance, and Vance Capital CEO Victor Vance. The 3 most powerful feared titans of the American political and financial elite had pushed aside their congressional hearings, board meetings, and international acquisitions just to stand on a public stage in Manhattan and celebrate their baby sister's triumph. Thank you for coming, Arthur, Edward, Victor. I laughed, wiping a happy tear from my eye as Arthur kissed my cheek. Are you kidding me? We wouldn't have missed this for the world, Jules. Senator Arthur Vance said, his usually austere political face beaming with absolute unbridled joy. Walking through this pavilion today, seeing the lives your genius going to touch. It is the single greatest point of pride in our family's history. The financial underwriting on this facility is already being studied as a masterclass at Harvard Business School. Edward smiled, tapping his silver-rimmed glasses. You proved that true brilliance doesn't need to hide behind anyone else's name. Victor stepped forward, his dark eyes shining with profound, quiet affection as he squeezed my shoulders. You took the worst pain a woman could experience, Jules, and you transformed it into a monument of strength and beauty. You are the undisputed master of your own destiny, Mommy. A bright, joyous voice rang out across the stage. I turned around just in time to catch my 9-year-old daughter as she came sprinting into my arms. Lily had grown into a remarkably tall, beautiful little girl with bright, intelligent eyes and an unshakable spirit. Dressed in a gorgeous white lace party dress that matched my suit, she looked like a little princess as she beamed up at me. Held carefully in her hands was a small, elegant, navy blue velvet jewelry box. Happy grand opening, Mommy, Lily announced proudly, her voice carrying over the nearby microphones. I have a special present for you. I worked on it for months. A present for me, sweetheart? I asked, kneeling down on the stage so I was eye level with her. Lily nodded enthusiastically and popped open the velvet lid. Resting inside on a bed of white satin was a breathtaking custom-crafted solid gold pendant hanging from a delicate shimmering chain. As I leaned in closer, my breath hitched in my throat. The gold pendant was an exact, flawless master replica of the crude, lopsided, smiling face from the construction paper necklace Mitchell had crushed beneath his shoe 3 years ago in the Park Avenue lobby. I saved up all my weekly allowance for 2 whole years, Mommy, Lily explained, her bright eyes shining with unconditional love. And then I asked Uncle Edward to introduce me to the best master jeweler on 5th Avenue so we could cast my old drawing into real solid gold. She reached out and gently touched the shining gold charm. I remember when that bad man crushed my paper necklace and made us cry. That made me so sad. So, I wanted to give you a real indestructible gold medal today, Mommy, because you worked harder than anyone else in the whole world. and you built the most magical place in New York. Now, you have a necklace that nobody can ever break. Hearing my 9-year-old daughter's pure, beautiful words, the emotional floodgates in my heart opened completely. Tears of absolute overwhelming joy poured freely down my cheeks, catching the brilliant afternoon sunlight. Oh, my sweet, brave girl. Thank you, I sobbed happily, throwing my arms around her and pulling her tight against my chest. This is the most precious treasure in the entire universe. I will treasure it forever and ever. Lily giggled happily, taking the delicate gold chain from the box and carefully fastening it around my neck. The solid gold charm rested over my heart, gleaming brilliantly against the white silk of my designer suit. A permanent shining symbol of our resilience, our triumph, and our unbreakable bond. I stood back up, holding Lily's hand tightly in mine as my 3 older brothers stepped up to flank us on both sides. Together, we stood on the Grand Plaza stage, looking out over the glittering diamond-bright waters of the Hudson River as the golden afternoon sun bathed the Manhattan skyline in a warm, triumphant glow. We had walked through the bitter freezing storm of betrayal and humiliation, refusing to let the cruelty of others break our spirits. And now, standing together in the brilliant sunshine of our own creation, we were moving forward into an endless, boundless future, strong, united, and truly untouchable for the rest of our days.